right, strap yourselves in because today we're diving deep into the music industry. We're looking at the legal battle between Kirk Burrowes and Sean Puff Daddy Combs, and wow, this one's a doozy.
It's a case from 2006, but it still gets brought up today, even in like legal circles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it touches on a lot of legal issues that still matter today.
That's fascinating. Okay, so Kirk Burrowes and Sean Combs, they were partners, right?
Yeah.
At Bad Boy Entertainment.
At Bad Boy Entertainment, Burrowes was actually one of the first people to really help launch Puff Daddy's career.
I just see.
And then in 2005, things went south, and Burrowes ended up suing Combs.
And what were the claims? Like, what was he suing over?
Oh, Burrowes claimed a whole lot of things. I mean, we're talking breach of contract, we're talking fraud, and there's even this crazy incident where he claims there was a baseball bat involved.
Wait, a baseball bat? Okay, hold on. We have to rewind. What's the story with the baseball bat?
So in 1996, Burrowes says that Combs threatened him with a baseball bat to try and force him to sign away his part of Bad Boy Entertainment.
Oh, wow.
And to add to the drama, Combs' lawyer, Kenneth Meiseles, was supposedly there when this all went down.
Oh, man, that's intense. So on top of the baseball bat incident, Burrowes also claimed that Combs messed with his business by convincing Mary J. Blige to leave him.
Yeah, that's right. Burrowes said that Combs convinced Mary J. Blige to break her talent management contract with him.
So that brings up this whole legal idea of interfering with a contract, right?
Exactly. It's called tortious interference with a contract. Basically, it means that someone intentionally gets in the way of an existing contract between two other parties.
So let's say you and I have a deal for you to paint my house, but then someone comes along and talks you out of it.
Right.
And convinces you to paint their house instead. Would that be tortious interference?
Yep, that's a good example.
So with Mary J. Blige, Burrowes is saying that Combs interfered in his contract with her.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, in court, you can't just say someone meddled. You have to prove that their actions directly caused the contract to be broken. It's this idea called but-for causation.
Oh, I see. So it's but for this person's actions, the contract would have been fine.
Exactly. The court needs to see that direct link.
Gotcha. Now, I'm a little confused about the timeline here. This baseball bat incident was in '96, but Burrowes didn't file this lawsuit until 2005. That's almost a decade later. Why'd he wait so long?
Right. Well, there's this thing called the statute of limitations. Basically, each state has laws that set a time limit for when you can file certain types of lawsuits.
Oh, like a deadline.
Yeah, think of it like if you and your friend had an argument, you can't keep bringing it up years later.
Right.
There has to be some kind of time limit.
Makes sense?
Otherwise, things would get messy. So these time limits are there to make sure legal claims happen within a reasonable amount of time.
Okay, so how did Burrowes try to get around that deadline? A decade seems way past any deadline.
Well, he argued that Combs hid information from him. He said he couldn't have known the full extent of what was going on until much later. He also claims he was actively trying to find out the truth all along.
So he was being diligent.
Yeah, that was his argument.
Okay, so did the court buy it?
Well, here's where things get really interesting legally. This 2005 lawsuit is actually connected to a lawsuit Burrowes filed earlier against Combs back in 2003.
Oh, there's another lawsuit.
Yeah. In that one, Burrowes accused Combs of violating the RSA Co. Act. That's the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. But the court dismissed that case because the statute of limitations had already run out. Now, because this 2005 lawsuit had a lot of the same facts and legal issues as the earlier ISC case, it triggered something called collateral estoppel.
Collateral estoppel. Okay, that sounds like a mouthful.
No, right? Basically, think of it like this. Imagine you and your roommate are arguing about whose turn it is to do the dishes.
Okay.
You finally agree on a system for who does what, right? Well, you can't keep re-arguing that same point every time the sink's full of dishes.
Okay, I get it.
You had your chance to argue. The decision was made. You have to stick with it.
So you can't keep bringing up the same issue over and over.
Right, and that's kind of what collateral estoppel does in legal terms. It prevents the same legal issue from being relitigated between the same people.
Okay, so because the court had already made a decision on these issues in the RKO case, Burrowes couldn't just bring them up again in this new lawsuit.
Exactly.
So the outcome of that earlier case really messed things up for him in this 2005 lawsuit.
Yeah, you could say that. The court had already shut down Burrowes' arguments about the statute of limitations in the RKO case.
Okay, so then what happened to the rest of his claims in this 2005 lawsuit? Did they just throw them all out because of the deadlines?
Pretty much. The court dismissed most of them, including the breach of contract claims, because they were filed too late.
Wow.
But there was One claim that wasn't dismissed right away, that claim about Combs interfering with Mary J. Blige's contract.
Huh. Why did that one survive?
It seems like the court needed more info to decide if that specific claim was also too late.
So they weren't sure if the deadline had passed for that one?
Right. They wanted to look at the evidence and see if there was really a strong enough link between what Combs did and Mary J. Blige leaving Burrowes.
So this whole case really highlights how crucial it is to know about legal deadlines.
Oh, absolutely. You could have the best argument in the world, but if you miss the deadline, you might be out of luck. It's a big reminder for everyone, even if you're not involved in some high-profile music industry feud.
Yeah, you really have to know your rights and make sure you're acting within those timeframes.
Exactly.
It's kind of wild to think about how statutes of limitations and collateral estoppel played such a big role in the court's decision.
Yeah.
But even with all the legal stuff, I think what's really interesting is the human drama behind all of this. You've got Kirk Burrowes and Sean Puff Daddy Combs, right? They were friends, partners,
Yeah.
and now they're like battling it out in court.
It really makes you think about the whole thing with ambition, you know?
Yeah.
Loyalty and betrayal, and maybe even like the price of success, especially in a field like the music industry.
It is competitive.
It is, yeah.
And speaking of roles, I'm also curious about the lawyers in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Kenneth Meiselas, Combs' attorney, was allegedly there during that baseball bat incident in '96. It makes you wonder, like, what are the lines that lawyers have to walk in these situations?
For sure, lawyers, they have this duty to represent their clients, you know,
Right.
fight for them. But there's also a whole code of ethics they have to stick to.
Yeah.
It's a tough balance sometimes.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about Mary J. Blige.
Oh, yeah, she got caught right in the middle of this whole thing.
She did. She was managed by Burrowes, but then she ends up signing with Bad Boy. I mean, talk about a conflict of interest.
Definitely a classic conflict of interest. And this situation really shows just how complicated the relationships are in the music industry.
For sure. Artists, they often have contracts with so many different people, and sometimes, yeah, things clash.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about the legal ins and outs of this case, but I'm kind of curious about the bigger picture. Did the court ever actually say whether or not what Combs did was ethical? I mean, even if it wasn't technically illegal?
That's a good question. I mean, from what we see in the documents, they didn't really dig into that ethical side. The court's focus was strictly on, you know, the legal stuff.
So we're left to make our own judgments.
I guess so. The court might have said that Burrowes' claims were too late, but that doesn't mean they were like, oh yeah, what Combs did was totally fine.
Right. So maybe legally it's over, but ethically there are still questions.
Absolutely. And that's probably why this whole case still has people talking, even all these years later. I mean, it makes us think about power, about loyalty, and, you know, what people are willing to do to succeed. It's messy.
It's really interesting to think about what might have happened if things had gone differently. Like, what if Burrowes had sued sooner?
Yeah.
What if you'd had more proof? Could things have turned out differently?
It's definitely possible. I mean, statutes of limitations are important, but they can be kind of tricky when you think about how sometimes people don't even realize they've been wronged until much later.
It's true. And what about the judge? Like, what if a different judge had been in charge of the case? Could their own opinions have changed the outcome?
It's hard to say for sure. Judges, they're supposed to be impartial, right?
Yeah.
But they're also people. You know, they have their own experiences, their own views.
Yeah.
So it's possible, but we can't know for sure. It's an interesting thought, though.
It is. And this case also makes me think about how much public opinion matters. Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, he's a big name. Do you think that affected things?
It's hard to say for sure, but I mean, public opinion can definitely have an influence, even if it's not something that's like officially acknowledged in court.
Right.
These big cases, they get so much attention from the media, it shapes how people see things.
Yeah. And sometimes that pressure from the public can actually achieve things that the courts can't.
Yeah.
You know, like think about boycotts or protests or even like online campaigns.
Oh, for sure.
They can really change how people think and even make powerful people change what they're doing.
You're right. I mean, the legal system is supposed to be fair, but it's not perfect. Sometimes it takes that public pressure, people speaking out, to hold those in power accountable.
This whole case, it's like opening up a can of worms. It shows how even what seems like a simple legal fight can bring up all these complicated questions about what's right, what's wrong, who has the power, and what justice really means.
I agree. It reminds us that legal battles, they're just one part of a much bigger story.
And we're back diving deeper into this whole saga with Kirk Burrowes and Sean Puff Daddy Combs. We've really gone through it all, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Contracts, legal deadlines, all that power stuff, and the crazy world of the music industry. It's fascinating.
It is. So as we wrap things up, I want to hear your final thoughts. What does this whole case tell us about the connection between law, ethics, and personal responsibility?
Well, to me, it really highlights how important it is to understand your legal rights, no matter what you do in life, you know?
Yeah.
Like whether you're signing a contract, starting a business, or just navigating relationships in your career, you got to know the rules of the game.
Absolutely. And it's not just about knowing the rules. It's about having the guts to stand up for yourself if you think you've been wronged.
Hmm.
I mean, Kirk Burrowes went up against Sean Combs, a giant in the music industry. That's a big deal.
Yeah, he did. And even though it didn't turn out the way he probably wanted, him taking that stand, it sends a message, doesn't it? It shows that even if it seems like you're fighting an uphill battle, you can still challenge the way things are and go after what you believe is right.
Yeah, he didn't back down.
Yeah.
It's also important to remember that these legal battles, they can really take a toll, emotionally and financially. It makes you think about what Burrowes went through.
It does. Taking legal action, it's a long, tough road, and there's no guarantee you'll win. You really have to weigh the costs and what you might gain before you jump into something like that.
That's true. But sometimes the biggest victories, they don't happen in court, you know? They happen when people see you being brave and standing strong, even when things are unfair.
That's a good point, a really good point. And maybe that's the real takeaway from this case, the part that sticks with us. It reminds us that even when the legal system might not deliver, people can still persevere, and fighting for what's right, well, that's always worth it.
What an incredible conversation. Big thanks to all of you listening in for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even started looking at the world a little differently. Thanks for being here.